Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Vibha Ahuja holds a Master of Science with honors and Ph.D. in microbiology from Punjab University, Chandigarh, India. She's presently the Chief General Manager at the Biotech Consortium India Limited, a position she's held since 1993. She has more than 30 years of experience in regulatory aspects of the commercialization of various biotechnology projects in areas such as biodiversity conservation and environmental industrial biotechnology. These projects have been in Asia as well as Africa, and she's been actively engaged in the development of the Indian regulatory framework and contributed to preparation of guidelines. Dr. Ahuja is well versed in the negotiations related to the implementation of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and participated in various COP-MOPs. She has coordinated capacity building activities in the area of modern biotechnology through seminars, workshops, and national and international training programs, and has published extensively in the area of biosafety. Therefore, I'm pleased that she has agreed to be the final speaker in this present webinar series, and very much look forward to what she has to present to us today. Vibha, please confirm that we can see and hear you, and you can proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Hector, and thank you to FNIH for inviting me to share this experience about the Asian region. At the outset, I also wish to compliment FNIH and the group that coordinated these webinars series. You know, it's been really good and very, very, very interesting to hear from experts from the various regions to share this experience. And I am very confident that this information will really help in advancing these new technologies, which can be effectively used to deal with some very serious problems in healthcare and agriculture and bring benefits to the society. So with this, I would like to initiate my presentation. And before I do that, I will very quickly like to inform you about myself. Dr. Hector already gave an introduction, but just to let you know what BCIL is, it is a Biotech Consortium India Limited, a very interesting organization which was conceived by the Government of India way back in 1990. It's a consortium of government in advisory capacity, the development banks as the major funding agency, and we also have a token participation of industry for commercialization insights. And all this was done to accelerate the commercialization of biotechnology in India. Of course, we do a lot of activities regarding the transfer of technologies, intellectual property management, human resources, but biosafety issues being a very important component on taking forward all these research leads to the society. We started working on it for almost 25 years. We've been there and have done a lot of activities towards this. Now, coming to my role in, role in the negotiations and all, I have not been, we've been supporting the Government of India in preparing all the position papers, analyzing various informations, and accordingly participate in the COP-MOPs as a support team. So that's my experience with the biosafety regulations, and I have been following up with, how the negotiations build up or how the various issues are being dealt with, and found it a very interesting. And so I'm here to share this with you. So what I'll be covering in my presentation, I'll just like to briefly introduce you to what is the Asia region and what are the key, features different from others, status of the biotechnology in general, participation in the CBD related matters, initiative towards regional cooperation, and some brief suggestions on how we can, work towards promoting the use of gene drives. So coming to the Asia region, this is one of the biggest, this is the biggest and the most populous continent in the world. There are 48 countries and 3 territories. This is what the World Atlas says. The count includes the transcontinental countries like Russia, with the majority of their population located in Asia. So we have excluded Russia because 75% of area is in Russia, but only 22% in population. And this is how the classification is done internationally. So there are 5 subregions. Of course, these regions are for the purpose of statistics by the UN, and they call it Eastern Asia, Southeastern Asia, Southern Asia, Central Asia, and Western Asia. So if we look at, the countries covered, I'm just showing this very quickly in a minute, just to put forth the point that there is a lot of diversity in the region. So if we look at the eastern part, we have China, Japan, Mongolia, North Korea, and South Korea. And then we have whole of this Southeastern Asia, which you can see on the right-hand side bottom. 10 countries almost: Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, and so on. And then we have Southern Asia, the South Asia from where I come. This is India and the surrounding countries like Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and all this. And then we have Central Asia, which is closer to the Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and all those countries which were earlier part of Russia. Then there is this Western Asia, which is also some of the parts which are also called Middle East. And this is a very different area where you have Saudi Arab, Iraq, and so on. So it's a very, very big continent with a lot of diversity, both economically, culturally, and so on. So, but if you look at, all these countries, except for the few countries in the Middle East and leaving aside Japan and all that, most of the countries are developing countries. And because of that, another point is more than 50% population of the world lives in Asia. So out of that, in 2020, the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World report says that out of this, total 768 million undernourished people, 418 million people live in Asia. The rural population is in large numbers, especially in the countries in the South Asia and the other, which is why there is a lot of, the agriculture is also one of the major activity. Malnutrition and disease burden is there because malnutrition and the living conditions because of poverty for most of the population make the large section of population vulnerable to infectious diseases, and vector-borne diseases are a major disease burden. Asia, of course, is the second highest incidence of malaria after Africa, which is one of our key interest areas for taking forward gene drives. This is what the World Malaria Report says. We will come to the next section where I want to update you about generally, what is the status of biotechnology in Asia. We see a lot of significant variation in the countries because it is so diverse, as you saw, and very small countries are there. Research in biotechnology is being led by countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea. Then, of course, India, Indonesia, Malaysia. These are few numbered countries where there is active biotechnology research programs. Others are very, very, minimal activity. So the exposure, when I say the research is not there, so means we don't have that many qualified scientists and so on, which also help in the regulations and introduction of the new products. Most countries will have very limited number of research institutions and, not that much of a research activity, as I said. GM crops, one of the first range of crops, range of the GMOs which are approved for use. They are approved for cultivation and food and feed consumption in some countries. I will show you what is the status. I'm sorry. So this slide should have been a little later. Anyway, coming to the mosquitoes activity, there is an import of genetically engineered mosquitoes and testing for research in Malaysia and India. Some research on gene drives was initiated, but it is on hold in India. And we've also come across some limited research activities at the country level. And one of the examples is Sri Lanka, where they have done an RNAi-based Aedes aegypti they were developing and have really progressed well. Now, coming to the GM crops, that I was discussing, there are 8 countries in Asia which cultivate GM crops, and 10% of which constitutes the only 10% of the global area. So 50% of the population and 10% of the area. These are some of the crops which are listed in this table. And sorry, so India, China, Pakistan, Philippines, Myanmar, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. So as you can see, India and China is mainly cotton, and other countries, India, China, Pakistan, it was all cotton, Philippines corn, and then subsequently these countries have now started putting in new products, like Indonesia came with sugarcane, Bangladesh with brinjal, and golden rice has been recently adopted. However, because it is highly populous, and it's one of the major importers of grains and other materials also, Japan, South Korea, and Philippines are among the top 10 countries that have granted maximum number of approvals for feed, food, and processing. Others include Vietnam, Taiwan, Myanmar, etc. In addition to that, large quantity of processed products such as edible oils, animal feeds, etc., are imported in most of the Asian countries. In most cases, where there may not be any approval systems, but still they continue to import. Other than GMOs, I already explained about the mosquitoes, but generally it will be processed in the contained facility. No GMOs have been approved for environmental release other than GM crops, but products for healthcare, etc., are regularly imported. So this is broadly the structure of how the trends of using the technology or the products in Asia. Now, I would like to briefly discuss about what is the status of biosafety regulations, because all this is very important to, put forth where we are in terms of the capabilities to negotiate, So, if you look at the status of biosafety regulations, in most Asian countries, except, very few, like India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Singapore and Thailand, these were the countries which have issued some biosafety regulations prior to the protocol. But in most of the other countries, the national biosafety regulatory frameworks were a byproduct of the ratification of CPB and its entry into force. So the trigger was not the research, but trigger was that since we have now signed a Cartagena protocol, signed an international agreement, so the requirement is to have a national biosafety system, and that's how we are setting. Now, to start with, most of these regulatory instruments included policy statements, rules, etc., under the existing acts and guidelines. So you have some act already, like for example, Sri Lanka, they already had a food act. So just included one line there that GMOs will be subject to this, like that, In many countries, they are not even under any rules, but there are simply national biosafety policy. So this is very important this has a very important bearing on when we take forward any new technology in the country, because what is the legal strength of the instruments which are there. So and how strongly it is implemented, and how much importance the country attaches to this subject. So all these things are very important, and that's why I put forth like a brief understanding of what is the level of biosafety regulations. Now, over the years, many of these countries, because the UNEP projects were there, which I'll talk about a little later, some countries are moving towards enacting separate biosafety acts, but that also is subject to a lot of opposition, lot of there's a lot of debate, a lot of polarized debate in the countries, and this leads to delays in getting these acts or regulations put together. So in most cases, the legal enforcement of, as I said, is not that effective as compared to the acts. Now, one of the very important things, another is that there have been GEF-supported capacity building projects in most countries. As I said, the trigger was the Cartagena Protocol, and UNEP provided a lot of support in GEF support for biosafety capacity building. And the first round of activities always included development of the biosafety regulatory framework. But the UNEP had a certain standard set of regulatory requirements, and those were sort of adopted by most countries. And the regulations in these countries is mostly by the committees. We have committees, this committee a national committee and a biosafety committee. It will be broadly an interministerial committee and then a scientific committee which would be responsible for regulating the biosafety aspects of the biotechnology activities. And in most cases, except for very few, the nodal ministry or the agency, which is responsible for implementation of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, they are also the agencies responsible for the national biosafety regulations. So this means that this has a very important implication in practical terms, because in most of the countries it was environmental departments or environmental agencies, and those were not very well equipped to handle this kind of a scientific developments and scientific advances. The understanding of the genetic technologies, which required a case by case evaluation and a very different kind of an outlook, sometimes is missing. The environment ministries are more into the monitoring, or monitoring kind of activities. So for them to do risk assessment. And second thing was that many times there are food safety aspects where there are several other aspects which should be there, for which the expertise is in other ministries. So there are interministerial committees, of course, but definitely this acts like a little capacities are very limited, because they are housed there only. And wherever they are not housed, like for example, a very small country in our neighborhood is Bhutan. So there you have an agriculture and food regulatory authority and the environment authority. So there's always a kind of a gap, but of course the food regulation moves much better. So when it came to operationalizing these biosafety regulations, the challenges, as I said, was because the trigger was these capacity building projects, the protocol, and so on. So there have been quite a few challenges with these systems, which we have observed, interacting with many countries. There is definitely a lack of effective functioning. Once the project is over, the systems are, not working because there is no pressure. There are not that many products being developed internally, which can, which go to the regulators. And then there are because there is nobody responsible for the regulatory, nobody appointed specifically for this purpose. There are very frequent changes in the officials responsible for implementation. And there's a lack of understanding amongst the members of the regulatory committees. So, and now these are the people who are going to give inputs for the negotiations. So there also we see quite a bit of challenge. Only a very small number of countries have moved beyond the projects to operationalize their biosafety regulatory systems, which can be considered functional. And when we say functional, at least there should be a capacity to receive the submission, undertake the risk assessment, and make the decision making. So this is the minimum requirement for the functional systems, which is not so effective in many of the cases in Asia. Some of the reasons that we see is that progress has been often impeded by the limited political and financial commitments by the governments. The project was there, so there were technical people. I mean, I won't name the countries, but in some countries, the whole regulatory system was revolving around 2 or 3 people who were hired during the project. So there is no institutional capacity left after that. Redundant capacity building projects are also there. Absence of the projects to regulate, as I said, there are no applications or nothing, so they don't know what to do. And only a limited number have the substantial research programs. And where these are there, they are very good and they are of interest. There will be some countries where there is an interest for the private sector investment. So to summarize, there is a limited demand to drive the regulatory systems onwards and keep the policymakers' attention active. Otherwise, it gets redirected to the other priorities. We have one person, limited resources, one person who will be responsible for biosafety, biodiversity, national regulation, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the challenges. Now, as there was a lot of, when we say advancements, the things moved from GMOs to now a lot of buzzword is gene editing and a lot of activities are there. So as we know that, many countries have issued their policies and this kind of updated, this IV also keep updating it depending on what happens. So there have been discussions in the Asian countries also. The countries which have issued the policies are India, China, Japan, and the Philippines out of this whole global, this thing. Other countries, smaller countries, there is, in fact, many of the countries, there is not even a discussion about, that, okay, this technology is there, so what do we do about it? As you, this is a very common information that in Asia, the Japan is the only country which has approved gone ahead and approved the tomato and then the two fish products. Now coming to even the research level, if you look at the gene editing research, and this is a paper which was published in 2020 and in 2019 data is there. So if you see here, this is where the Asia is, after the US, all these countries. And then in Asia, the maximum research is in China, followed by Japan and South Korea, and then Israel and Saudi Arabia a little bit, and rest all only 2-3 countries where there's some research. Others, there is no activity at all. So now this is what I wanted to share with you, the scenario of the biotechnology and the biosafety regulations. With this background, we will discuss a little bit about the engagement of the Asia group as such with respect to the matters related to CBD. So if I put together this, looking at all the ratifications, that these are the 4 agreements under CBD. Of course, the ABS is not relevant to the discussions today, but still I put it just to show the, the trends. So if you look at CBD, all countries in Asia are parties to CBD. If you look at Cartagena Protocol, 43 countries are parties, except these Brunei, Israel, Nepal, and these 5 are not parties. Nagoya Protocol, 31 countries are parties, and 4 countries have only signed, and 13 have, are non-parties in a way. Even the signatories are non-parties till they sign, but still this is the status. Then came the supplementary protocol on liability and redress. So Cambodia, India, Japan, UAE, and Vietnam, these are the 5 countries which have signed, which have ratified, and rest there is no activity as so far. And I won't, I didn't want to discuss this too much. I will put together more data. So it's like, if you see the dates and how they have signed, so when the agreement is signed, there will be very slow response from most of the Asian countries. They will, over the years, it will come through when these projects are there and so on. Now, when we come to the negotiations related to CBD and particularly the Cartagena Protocol, I have more experience, so I'll talk about that a little more. So I have been participating in a few COP-MOPs, and what we have observed, and also in the documentation which comes, that though most countries in the Asia group are parties, you saw, 48 countries, all are parties to CBD, and there are many, 43 parties to CPB. But if you actually see in terms of the documentation, in terms of the discussions there, the participation and involvement in the negotiations is quite limited. And more so, the coordination among the countries is extremely limited. It is the lowest among all. So, it is very evident that there are very, very diverse groups. Diverse groups economically, culturally, socially. So broadly, when we are there, this kind of 4 grouping would be there. Middle East is here, South Asia is here, Southeast Asia is here. Although they look like this, but there are no unified positions I have ever seen from the Asia group, and there is no single representative agency as such. So there will be, and it doesn't mean that nobody talks to anyone. There will be more of a bilateral or a, maybe very small groups which will be formed there itself and would discuss with each other and put forth their points. But as far as the unified positions from Asia group are very, very limited. In fact, there are very few. Probably I'm not aware of examples. And then there is a reason, now you would see that what I wanted to say was that, there are committees, there are not permanent people. But if you see what happens in CBD and CPP is that negotiations on key topics are very long drawn. That's been our experience and as we have seen. So there is a challenges which are faced by these small and medium income Asian countries, and which include that there is a very limited manpower available. In a very small country, there will be only one person who will be handling so many subjects. No support. Biodiversity and biosafety is one of those, many items that they have to deal with, unless, as we have in United States, a full-fledged FDA with, I don't know, 600 scientists or what, and like USDA, not like that. Here, very small, no products, nothing, no experience in handling applications or these matters. The only thing will be we are very, we are rich in biodiversity, we have to protect our biodiversity and so on. Frequent changes take place in officials handling these issues in the relevant ministries and departments. Expertise in the agencies is not available. They depend on the members of the committees, and these committees members are mostly research scientists. So most of them may not even be the regulators. So these are some of the challenges, because of which I feel they are not able to participate that actively in the negotiations. And also, there is a, most of the times when we tried interacting, and because I work with the smaller countries also, so when you try to discuss with them, that okay, this document has come and so on. So mostly they'll be they'll say all this looks so confusing. There is a science, non-science considerations. These documents are based on consensus, and by the time our ACTACs and by the time our working groups, put together a document for sharing with so many brackets and so on, it's very confusing. And even in the final one, so many times we don't see a workable guidance or the path to be followed for decision making. I'm sorry for sounding a little negative, but unfortunately that is the situation. So I'll take an example of, which we were following a lot in our country and also trying to help the other countries in the region, in responding to it. So if we take an example on, negotiations related to risk assessment guidance in Cartagena Protocol, they started in 2004. So there have been almost, 14 or I don't know, 2002 or something, and there were discussions and so many mocks, Substa, AgTech, testing of the guidance document happened over a period of almost 14 years. And finally, what we had, no consensus document and a very only voluntary guidance. So these people feel, oh, what is it, So this is just a chart I would like to share with you, 2004, the ACTEC was established to study the nature and the scope of existing approaches and identify existing gaps. Then we were in Bonn, where the ACTEC was established, and an online forum was developed. In between also there was an activity. And then you have a document, there was a guidance on the risk assessment of LMOs. But since there was difference of opinion, we called for further scientific review and testing. And this testing took quite a while, helped actually countries, try to test it with the test cases. Established a new ACTEC was established again, and then called for a testing thorough guidance through the online forum. First, it was this thing, and there was hardly any responses, very, very, in fact, we had calculated at that time, I think not even 31% of the parties had done the basic test, the main document testing. And as we went on to the specific documents, it was like 2 or 3 or 4% of the parties. So again, we welcomed the results of the testing, the called for revisiting based on the results. Then finally, all that went on. And what was the end result? A voluntary guidance, and the ACTEC work was ended. So when the final thing came, the parties did not endorse, nor welcome, nor acknowledge, but simply it was referred to as a voluntary guidance to be considered with all available guidance documents. So how do you expect, how do we expect those small countries with minimum expertise to work like that? On the other hand, I will come to this later, documents like current with the scientific agencies like Codex, WHO and all, they are very clear. And then although they are voluntary, but they have a lot of, acceptability. So this document, as far as I know, has not been adopted by most countries. And there were, parties which were objecting a lot, including India, that it doesn't represent the many years of experience, not properly reviewed, revised, too convoluted, and making the risk assessment very difficult. I mean, I work with the regulatory committees, and in fact, we managed the regulatory work for almost 10 years. And if you look at that document, it is so difficult to take a decision. So after that, what happens is there's a request for, so what do these countries, in Asia? I remember Malaysia and all these people coming up with a lot of list of activities, that, oh, there should be guidelines for trees. There should, the moment they'll come across any product, there should be guidelines for, this was their abiotic stress, mosquitoes, trees, monitoring, fish, synthetic biology. And in fact, this was a shorter list. The original list, when they invited it, it came like 24 or 30 or some kind of products. So in fact, some of the people were, we were laughing that maybe it's like a red frog, blue frog, and so on, that much of guidance. And how much it is useful as the core guidance has not even been accepted. And this debate continues there. So that is what ends up with, minimum interest in the negotiations by the people who have joined new in this thing. They have only few years. There is not institutional memory, and very difficult to participate in the discussions. Now, and that becomes evident in, if you anytime try to analyze when the comments are sought on various documents, the participation of the Asia group is very limited. Like this recent document on risk assessment of living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives and LM fish, and the discussions were there in Substa. So there were only 3 statements by Asians, and very, very general statements. Release should be, prior impact assessment, strict regulation, and liability redress mechanism. Korea saying that it is important to develop the guidance. Indonesia, this was of course a video statement, but we just took the basic point that strengthening of guidelines is important. We recognize the pros and cons and so on. But this is of course because, as I said, there is no single agency in Asia which represents the Asian groups, and unified positions are not there because of various reasons. But there have been some initiatives for regional cooperation, and I just wish to discuss those. At least 3 of them that I'm aware of. There are some recent ones, but they're very localized and political kind of initiatives. So this is what we have, the ASEAN group. This is the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations, and of course it was established long back and with an objective to accelerate the economic growth, social progress, cultural development, etc. in the region. And these are the members in the ASEAN region, very close to each other geographically also. And they have, various programs under ASEAN, and biotechnology is one of the priority areas, and it includes listed like every agriculture, medical, every biotechnology. There are discussions and meetings held. Sometimes I've seen on biosafety regulations, and there were some efforts to develop some common application forms and things like that, but they have not moved beyond those kind of few meetings. There is a network they tried to form, which was the GM food testing network for harmonizing the ASEAN GMO regulatory framework and environment, particularly talking of the food testing parts. Then we have here what is in the South Asian region, SAARC, it's the South Asia Association, Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, because it was established in 1985, and again accelerating the economic growth, science and all. They have special areas of cooperation in the environment, natural disasters and biotechnology. So something does start in all these areas, but then SAARC is sort of not working in sort of limbo since last 2-3 years because of the political differences. But some activities have been undertaken earlier, and this platform has actually some agencies like SAARC Agriculture Center, SAARC Environment Center, and even from BCIL, and one of the programs that we implement called South Asia Biosafety Program in India, Bangladesh, and in this region. So we've also tried to work with them to take forward some of the harmonization work, but not with much success. So even way back in 1990 itself, they they set up a technical committee on science and technology working group on biotechnology. But as far as the CBD or the protocol negotiations are concerned, we have not seen any major effort in this for us. Regarding specific to the biosafety, one of the very good initiatives was by South Korea, which started with for regional cooperation biosafety. It was started in 2008, and they organized quite a few workshops, side events in the COP MOPs and so on for exchange of information. To start with, they focused on biosafety clearinghouse, but they were also trying to, motivate people to share their positions and so on. 23 countries participated in these activities, but the activity, it's been very slow and not a very active engagement from the people, from the countries. That's what we observed. Finally, they also established a portal for engagement in the activities related to the Cartagena Protocol. From 2018 onwards, the activities were expanded, and they had two Asia forums were organized in 2018 and 19 on GMOs and gene editing. I've been actively working with these people, so I'm aware of their activities. And now they propose to still continue their activities in collaboration with the UNEP. So this is how their website looks like. Asia Biosafety, BCH Family, one for biosafety, and so on. But if you actually go and look for the data, so I sort of scrolled there. They have a specific section on CPB implementation experience. Very nice, beautiful flags and everything. But when you go inside, there's a very limited information available. Only from 3 countries, there were brief write-ups, Korea, Mongolia, and Philippines. Rest of all is, very little information. So this is broadly all about Asia. I have no, because there are not many unified positions, so we cannot share with you that, how the joint positions are taken and so on as a group. But I have some considerations, for discussion that there is a really an extensive engagement of Asia group is required for making these use of these advanced biotechnology tools like gene drives and so on. Because if you look at any reports, whether it is the Asia Development Bank or UNDP and all, there is a need to improve the development indicators, and for which they will definitely need new tools and techniques. But how to take forward and make them adopt these technologies are required here is definitely a challenge. To meet the SDG commitments, SDGs, and so on, there is a lot of requirement because more than, as I said, more than 50% of the population lives in this region. I feel that this is my personal view that the process for the safety assessment guidelines and protocols should be with the scientific agencies rather than under the protocol. Protocol should give broad methodologies on how to do the decision making. Rather than we should have more scientific experts. So why I'm saying this, because when we talk of the food safety assessments, there is definitely a more buy-in from the stakeholders for the codex guidelines as compared to if you have a document under protocol and all. Of course, there are some countries which definitely follow it a lot, try to follow. Then or at least they will try to look back and see that what is in the protocol. So when we have negotiators, they are from the ministries, they are there is not scientific expertise, and that is why we do not have much feedback which is provided from the country to the negotiation table. So this is definitely a gap. They do hold sometimes stakeholder consultation, at least in India we used to hold, but that would also be very small level. See, having 20 people in a country of 1.3 billion, so how do you reach out to them? And that requires efforts. There are not that many people in the secretariats. So I personally feel that, having worked in this area for so long, that safety assessment guidelines should come from agencies like FAO, WHO, etc. And one more point is that if we really have to take forward these technologies, we should encourage collaborations at the early stages itself. Because what happens is sometimes, we see that when the products are ready and then they come, and then it is like a, resistance in terms of, oh, this is coming from transnationals and all that. Or we are being used as a testing ground and like that, feelings are there. More, if you have more involvement of the local counterparts in various activities like testing at the beginning itself, research, as soon as you are at advanced levels of research, particularly things like gene drives and all, this will definitely help in increasing the public confidence. And there should be very clear implementation pathways. Many times, when these oxytech and other active this thing came up, people used to think that, oh, everybody comes to make money, that kind of feeling is also there in small countries. So we should have a very clear implementation pathways to talk to the policymakers, and then the things can move forward in terms of support both at the national and at the international level. So these are just some of the things which I thought I can put forth for discussion. And with this, I will like to close and ready for any questions or any additional information and so on.
Well, thank you very much, Vibha. That was a very interesting perspective on the role of the different countries in the Asian region in terms of biosafety and the biosafety protocol, as well as the Convention on Biological Diversity. Actually, that's an interesting. We've gone through an interesting evolution of different types of coordination. We first started with hearing from Africa, which seems to be very tightly coordinated in terms of their approach to the negotiations. And then we've last week heard from Latin America, where there seems to be some coordination, but not as tight as we heard in Africa. And then you now have shown us Asia, where it seems as though there is really a very loose association. I can't even call it a coordination among the different countries. And it just seems to me that this just doesn't seem to be an area of high interest on the part of the Asian countries. And it's interesting, you said at the very beginning that there's really very little demand in terms of trying to coordinate these things, and particularly because there doesn't seem to be a lot of internally driven or nationally driven scientific work in this area. And that strikes me as curious, given what I think everyone recognizes as a relatively high level of scientific capacity in Asia. And so I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts on that area, particularly also talking about what might be of particular interest to Asian countries and the needs of Asian countries that might encourage investment, national investment in biotechnology projects in this area.
Yeah. So it is very interesting that you've rightly pointed out that why there is not internal. So there is research, there is scientific community, but I'll give you an example of India. In 2014, we did a survey, in our country on what kind of products, are under research. I'm talking of plants because there is a little more experience there. So we were ourselves surprised that at that time, almost 85 different, plants. There was some degree of research, whether it was at maybe they had just done the transformations, or there was an interest in medicinal plants and very, very different traits and so on. But some decisions, politically that have been taken from time to time have really negated, or delayed, slowed down all the effort in that. So for example, in India in 2009, the environment minister, we only have BT cotton, one product approved, and he, took the decision that based on some, political or public opinions, that we will put a moratorium on this. And that has really acted as a demotivating factor. So this is one of the reasons in countries like India, or I can only talk about India in that sense, But coming to the other countries where that we see around, there is some degree of the investments, but that capacity to translate these research leads into products, that also is missing. And that is missing because not that the lack of scientific expertise, but partly because of the ineffective regulatory systems. The committees don't meet, there are no protocols. You submit an application and you do not know when the next meeting will be held or whether the members would understand. They might raise certain queries which are not even in the guidelines. So this process goes on, and that the interest, the scientist loses interest, and the products are just shelved, So it is a combination of not just the funding or maybe the scientific expertise is not missing, but the inefficient regulatory systems also are one of the major reasons.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's really an interesting perspective. I'd like to invite anyone in the audience to please, if you have any questions, type them in the chat function or raise your hand, as Dave Obrakta has done, and deliver your questions yourselves. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over now to Dave and have him join our conversation.
Good.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Vibha, for a nice overview of the region, which I found to be very, very helpful. Thank you. I guess I sensed in your talk that there was a considerable amount of frustration, actually. I don't in some of the ways that you were describing the way that the CBD works. I guess it was, and I guess my question had to do with what, if anything, might make it work better from your perspective. I think, and I guess the one frustration seemed to be that things took such a long time to work through that system. So I was just interested in, someone with your experience to maybe comment on if you think that there are ways that might be improved. Thanks.
We had, if you look at the Climate Change Convention and other, there you have very clear and well-defined goals, that you're working towards 1.5 or 2 degree temperature, slowing it down to that and all. We never had such clear objectives in CBD. They have spread too thin, and, maybe at times we feel gone beyond their mandates, probably, that's one of the reasons. And when we go to the negotiators or like the big bosses, you go to the minister or you go to this one, you say, okay, this convention is there. So what is it trying to achieve? So we'll say convention on biology, this blah, 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 5-10 different things, And then he will say, okay, so what is for the specific protocol? Sir, they are working towards a risk assessment document. Oh, since when and when it would come? We have no idea. It has taken 10 years. It may take another 10 years. And finally, you have this voluntary guidance document. So this overall functioning, definitely, it is very difficult to explain to the new people, as I said, people keep changing in this. There will not be a single person sitting on that position for 14 years. In no way. So all this has really, affected. So what I feel is that the activities under the Cartagena Protocol or these negotiations should be very limited and focused. They should focus it and achieve it in a defined period. But, rather than delaying, long drawn processes are definitely a deterrent. And then many times there is no focus. And, there was socioeconomic considerations was a enabling, I'll give you an example, was an enabling provision in the Cartagena Protocol. But there has been so much of discussion, so many ACTAC and all that help were this thing. So when we went and told our, one of the very senior persons, and at that time, this was one of the agenda items. And he said, look at the diversity in India itself or diversity in the region. The social considerations would be so different. And it is very difficult to come to a consensus. And why is CPB doing it when it is an enabling provision? So my only thing is that they should not spread it too thin. It should be very focused, and this kind of development of guidance and all this should be left to the scientific bodies. I mean, we see a very high level of acceptability of codex guidelines. Wherever you go, people are willing to follow it for decision making and so on. The information exchange and all those things, if you look at their own I'm not sorry, I'm criticizing a little bit, but then because we are not able to sell it in our countries, after 15 years, the achievement was a fully functional biosafety clearing house, So this is, I think they are getting into too many things, and it should be very focused, and deliverables should be there, which can be very effectively taken up by the countries and implemented.
That's good advice.
Sorry,
it does seem like something, for example, when you look at the lack of ability to even reach some of the targets that have already been set for, let's say, for biodiversity under the convention. I think what you're saying is very appropriate, that there's so many targets and so much discussion over those targets, and none of them have actually been met.
Very small countries, very small systems, and you have too many spread out things, so nothing moves. There's no interest in this.
I guess one of the things that you said, which is interesting, and I mean, to boil it down and to basically put words in your mouth, you're saying let the experts do it, and in some ways, I mean, there's a lot of pushback from that particular point of view, I think, in terms of how decisions are made these days, and so there's obviously there's a lot of interest in being inclusive, and so I guess what we're seeing here is the trade-offs, right, of having that larger discussion, opening it up to people, a broader discussion, and it ends up really slowing things down. Yes. But I guess but in the end, you still want to have a product that comes out that's useful, and so there has to be some balance. So I'm just making a comment. But
you're very right.
We're putting a lot of emphasis on the so-called experts, right? And I guess there's a whole discussion about
you're very right, and I am aware of those discussions.
Yeah.
And what I want to say here is that in our India, I'll give you an example of India. That in India, our rules and regulations do not have a component of any social consultation, because they were made way back in '89. There are some processes to have a state level machinery and so on and so forth. In spite of that, it is not that government of India is not, responsible enough. And they did, when BT cotton was to be released, the first product in our country, there was a socio-economic assessment study done. Despite it was not in the rules, the farmers, the benefits, likely benefits to the farmers and to the society were properly analyzed. Meetings were held with all these people, and then the decision was taken. So this is what we feel, I'm sure most countries will take into all these things in account when they release these products. We have responsible governments. They will take decision making may involve science and non-science considerations and so many things. And that should be left to the national governments. So what I'm saying is separating these issues. The documents become more confusing because we are mixing up everything. We are mixing up when we are having science-based guidelines, that particular part being dealt with, then we don't need the organizations which have no expertise. So I do not know. I mean, in the Codex guidelines for food safety assessments, how are they very nicely accepted? We need to look at that. There, nobody debates them. Most countries, they don't debate. Codex laws are very accepted. Similarly, the WHO and other documents are accepted. But here, when we have ACTEX and other things, there should be a distinction between the scientific considerations and the non-science considerations, which can be taken up by the national governments while taking the decision. Some product may be very good, but I don't want it in my country. That's because of maybe XY issues particular to my country. So that will happen at the national level. But at the international level, when we try to mix too many things, we end up having not the buy-in is not there. You see, we ourselves saw that after 40, I mean, what do we, claim after that? Years of meetings, so many people traveling here and there, ACTACs, online forums, and so on. And at the end of it, you are not able to come up with a document with consensus. So that's a question, no?
Yep. Yeah. Well, speaking of the the GM cotton that you had just mentioned, Dorrington Ogoye has a question here. It says he says the adoption of GM cotton has been a success story to the rest of the world and especially Africa. How has the adoption of BT cotton in India influenced GM adoption in other Asian countries?
No, adoption of BT cotton has been very, very successful in India, and we have shared that experience with other countries, even like Pakistan or our other countries. This has definitely been very positive, and not only BT cotton, it is definitely the only thing what happened is after BT cotton, the decision that was taken by our minister in slowing down the BT brinjal, that had a bit of negative effect, and that has sort of slowed down the development or the adoption in other countries, because particularly countries in the South Asia region and the Southeast Asia region do look at India on what is happening here. So BT cotton success was very, very phenomenal. 95% adoption in almost after 3 years and so on. But subsequently, the decision to hold on BT brinjal and political decisions, those had a little negative effect. But we are very hopeful now, and I am very pleased to share with you all that India has taken a very positive decision on gene editing. On March 30th, 2022, there's a notification which has been issued where the products of SDN1 and SDN2 plants will all be exempted from the biosafety regulations. And of course, the initial work in the contained conditions will be regulated as per the institutional biosafety committees. But once you have demonstrated that it is absence of transgene, then you are free to go. So this kind of positive discussions are coming. And these are also related to the needs, at this point of time, the grain situation, the requirement of, everybody talks of food security. The feed security is another issue, There's a large demand for feed products. And of course, along with that disease burden, we have insects. Even in the agriculture, pink bollworm has affected cotton now. There are no technologies. And people have to think about nothing is working. When these kind of things happen, this is only the genetic technologies and these tools which will come handy. So I'm sure that BT cotton has been successful. It is a very good example, and this will definitely motivate not just in India, but other countries also. The only thing is, many times people start saying that this is a non-food crop. Because they think that it doesn't go into the food chain, which is not true. It is the meal as well as the oil from the cotton seed also goes into the food chain. So these issues are there, but this success has definitely had a positive impact.
Thanks for that, Vibha. We have a question from Willie Tanui, who greets you first of all, and he says you have an excellent program under the South Asia Biosafety Program, and how are things going with that particular program?
Yeah, so this is the South Asia Biosafety Program is a capacity building program, and we started in 2005 with a very limited funding from USAID. But we have been able to sustain it very well over the years. It is still very active. And one of the things that we started was a monthly newsletter, which is actually coming for almost 17 years very timely, and it connects people. So another important thing which has happened in SABP is that, this I always say that the success of the program is also because of the local coordination. So it is not that many of the programs that we have seen, programs by the foreign funding agencies, there is somebody sitting in the Europe and they are trying to do activities in the country and they don't have a full-time coordinators. Whereas in SABP, we had this collaboration. BCIL, our agency, has been the country coordinator since its inception. So it is not that of course now we have the technology and we are holding these meetings, but in the earlier time, only when the delegation comes, there is work. There is a constant work going on of some activity or the other, which the local coordinators follow. We had a coordinator in Bangladesh, we had a coordinator in Pakistan. For some time the program was active in Pakistan. So it has been a kind of a continuous activities and a follow-up with continuous presence of the project in the country, which made a lot of difference in the success. This is what I feel. Otherwise many times you don't have very active coordinators, and there is a gap in the activities that we did not allow to happen, and kept the connection with the stakeholders on a continuous basis.
Great, thank you. Willie has a second question. He asks, he says one of the Asian countries recommended that impact assessments should be considered for emerging technologies such as gene editing. And Willie asks, what are some of the impact assessments that are common in Asia, and if they are currently used for GM crops?
Impact assessments for GM crops, there have definitely been some activities, and it was not very common in Asia earlier. Even for the regular projects, there won't be projects, technologies, not very, that kind of level of expertise has not been there. But of late we see, I'm talking of the small and medium countries, not the countries like Japan and Korea and all, but in all these countries, definitely impact assessments have been done. For example, in India, for BT cotton, there have been done what kind of benefits have come socially, economically, and even scientifically. It was very interesting that one of the studies said, they actually studied the population of bees. So what they found is that bee population has increased a lot because of the reduced pesticides. Whereas we worry so much about the impact on non-targets and so on, while we do the pre-market safety assessment, but subsequently, these are the kind of impacts you see, the diversity getting increased. But as far as the impact assessment of gene editing is concerned, I think that will come only when these products are actually commercialized. But in that case, we have to also, in gene editing, the kind of discussions which have gone on in the country, and of course in our country as well as in all other countries, is that once it is free from the transgene, it is just like a conventionally bred product. So I don't see much, kind of impact assessments likely for products of gene editing as for in plants. Rest of the things we will see how it goes. But GM crops, definitely BT cotton, there has been quite a few studies. And even for BT brinjal, in Bangladesh, there have been an impact assessment studies. Much of this has also come from, the experts who have come from outside and they are guiding the projects. So the local agencies also learn and they ask for these studies.
Good. Thanks so much. I want to go back to the topic of guidance. You mentioned, of course, the expert agencies being the one that you would prefer to come out with these guidances as opposed to a body that is inherently political in nature. Last week we were talking to Pedro Rocha, and he also said that guidelines generally, at least from the point of view of the regulators that he has been talking with, would not be as useful as the presentation and discussion of specific case studies or examples. It seems to him that the the usefulness of guidelines is actually less limited, less valuable than examination of case studies or examples. What do you see from that perspective in terms of the regulators that you interact with in the Asian region?
Yes, no, this is exactly what he has said it right, because I'll give you an example. You see, I mentioned very briefly about a very good research initiative in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka declared themselves as malaria free. They became free in 2012. They took very good measures. But dengue, Aedes aegypti is still a big problem there. Was a big problem there till the time we were working. We have done an FAO project there, and so I have a very, very deep understanding of what happens in Sri Lanka. So they developed a RNAi-based, some very good initiative, and developed a genetically engineered mosquito. And this was being done at a regular university and a medical university too. The project moved to the medical university. So when they have gone to their regulators, they have very, because the project was a medical university and there is a very little knowledge about Cartagena protocol or biosafety regulatory system not active in Sri Lanka. So the researchers have simply approached their health ministry. So when they have gone to the health ministry, the first thing they'll ask is, oh, are there any guidelines to take it forward? And they contacted me and I shared with them the WHO guidelines. They were also aware of that guidelines, but we went through it very carefully and how they could be adopted. But then during the course of that, one member has said, somewhere the environment ministry and the Cartagena protocol will also come into force. So it took quite a bit of time for the regulators to understand, the health ministry, how all these people are part of this product. So what I mean to, but still, we did share with them the environment ministry said that we have to look at the guidelines available. We have to comply with Cartagena protocol and so on. And somebody pulled out that guidelines for mosquitoes. But since they have not been accepted so far, so this point was made to the regulators. But what I could see in that room or with those interacting with those policymakers, and they wanted a new set of guidelines to be made for Sri Lanka. Every time, they were feeling more confident and more, acceptability of the WHO guidance was much more. So that is what, I see that, when it comes from the scientific agencies with credibility, and it is whose subject matter. So that itself, makes a lot of difference. I mean, we have seen this happen. I'm saying this with experience that, when we interacted with the agencies, these are all IS, the civil servants, or some of them diplomats and so on.
Thank you. Dave, you have another question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to maybe get some of your thoughts and comments on how synthetic biology, that's in the discussions around synthetic biology, what those look like in the Asia region. So just trying to get some a little bit sort of beyond the GM, just the GM crops, but into some of these newer discussions about synthetic biology. Thanks.
Yeah, we initiated, under our South Asia Biosafety program, we used to have an annual conference starting from 2013. We had till this pandemic came, 6 or 7, 7 in fact, the conferences, and we had started discussions on synthetic biology, creating awareness and so on. Through that conference, special sessions, and in fact, when this, the discussions about DSI and synthetic biology, both, we got initiated in these conferences to educate the participants in this. And what we feel is that, there is, of course, limited research activity, and that research activity is not product oriented, basic biology and things like that. But people are, moving on. But what I feel is, what I want to share here is that I see a very little interaction between all those people who are working with synthetic biology and are aware of it versus our biodiversity regulators. So these people are the ones who are continuing, IGEM and India Indian students or the teams have been winning prizes in iGEM and all that. But here we have the other group, which thinks, oh no, what is this synthetic biology, as if something frightening is going to happen. So, I mean, there's a lot of, no convergence between that. There's a lot of polarized views and this one. And that's why we've been trying to, even when, we have to have our position. This is in a country where there is some research. But in all other countries, like the smaller world, the smaller countries, there is no understanding of it. For them, anything new, like any new technology, they are fearful of that. So that kind of feeling is there. There's a total lack of awareness. But at least in countries like India and others, we also try, even sometimes in Malaysia and all where I work, we do try to educate people that, you have to understand this. Now, it is very interesting that, all those reports which came on DSI by the CBD Secretariat, India was one of the first, very first few users of the information. And here we have another group of the regulators or the negotiators from the Biodiversity Authority who are talking about, oh no, we should regulate BSI and all that. So how do you find the stakeholders within countries to come together and talk to each other and understand your country's requirements? So there is a total, lack of knowledge about the potential regulatory scenarios and the potential uses also. So that's what I would say, that technologically, most of these groups, although most of these countries, they need these technologies very much. But then how will they adopt to these newer products, that is yet to be seen. But we are very happy, we are quite hopeful that when the new range of products come, so far it has been limited to those 4 or 5 commodities. But now as the more products are getting approved, and more applications are coming. We have now an applications for genetically modified yeast to increase the ethanol production, and which will be in the bioenergy sector play a major role. So we're looking at these kind of applications when they come to the consumers, or when what we say the consumer-oriented traits, or something which brings direct benefit to the citizens. I feel there will be change in attitude. See, nobody objected to the COVID vaccine, no? Like, I mean, of course, not to the medicines, but to the vaccine.
Yeah,
we had quite a few people here that
but that's a story for another day.
Not in India, everybody we had no opposition to vaccines.
All right, that's a story for another day.
Yeah.
I want to ask the question from Andrew Kigundo. He said, first of all, thanks you for your very enlightening presentation. He also mentions that there's similar challenges in Africa, particularly in the changing of officials. Does this affect the regulatory agencies in the same way as government officials and policymakers?
Definitely, it affects quite a bit, and so, but there are some ways that we've actually found out, that you could do to check on this. So there was very interesting decision taken by this thing, that you should never change your at least those of you who can influence the within the government. So it will be very useful if we are able to when you change, there's a tenure of a committee, 3 years, 2 years, or whatever. So when you constitute the next committee, don't change all the members, so that you have some continuity. So like that, we could find the ways and means for smooth functioning, or some institutional memory to remain, and uniformity in the decision. That is one thing. And the second thing, and another thing which I've found is, if you can promote, effective documentation, which is a very big problem here. The decisions are not that well documented, the discussions, documentation of discussions, documentation of decisions, and the complete this thing can be ensured, preferably digitally. Now we have in India, all this work is done digitally. The applications, right from we have almost 400 or 500 institutional biosafety committees. And earlier they will do some work, and what will be submitted, what would be recorded, there will be a lot of gaps. And no proper recording. But with the digitization of the whole thing, We have definitely a better systems, and I think these are the ways that we can't change the whole system, but then we can find out ways like this, what we say, the best practices, which can be incorporated to ensure that there is a better decision making and continuity in that, and these challenges can be overcome.
Thank you. I want to bring the discussion back around a little bit to gene drives in particular. We had talked a little bit about the interest in terms of the research community in Asia on biotechnology in general, but I want to just explore that a little bit more from the point of view of gene drives. How much of the scientific discussion among researchers in the Asian region do you see concerning gene drives and what they might be able to do for solving some of the problems in Asia? And also at the same time, what type of discussions have we seen amongst regulators in that same area?
Very limited discussions. And in India, for example, one institute was trying to do something activity, but they've also not been able to start the Tata Institute of Genetics and Society. And one of the reasons was that, people have a lot of apprehensions. So this kind of a misinformation, which is, created, is it going to eradicate and all that? Those people act faster. So one more thing is, whenever we have these kind of new technologies, I think the information dissemination in very simple languages and in a very thing should be promptly done. We do that. I mean, the people who are developed or projects like yours and others, they do that, but they are a little slower than, the way the activists act. So that overtakes, and naturally everybody also likes to hear negative news more than the positive news. This is one very important thing that we have to do is the languages and all is another issue. We in India itself, we have 16 languages in our constitution. So if you are trying to put across point to the people at large, it takes a lot of effort. The positive news, So I have a present status is that there is hardly any discussion. Once a while, maybe you see in popular press some article, but we really need to work towards that and work early, and also present, range of, options, a range of benefits that can come out of using this technology.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I don't see, Willie Tanoe has one more, and he's asking about transboundary movements of GM animals, and especially GM mosquitoes. How is the discussion around GM fish likely to affect discussions and regulations on transboundary movement in Asia?
As I said, as of now, there is a very limited discussion. But definitely, if it comes to the GM mosquitoes, all these landlocked countries which are very near, there will be these issues which will come up. In fact, I myself, have experienced sometimes, that we do a lot of work in Bangladesh. So, at the time of monsoon and other things, I've seen lots and lots of mosquitoes coming from Bangladesh to India, half an hour flight, and you see the whole plane is full of, few minutes, and then they do all kind of things. So definitely, I think really these issues will come up. And once we were making the guidelines, a small draft guidelines for Sri Lanka, so they were very happy, that, we are an island, so no mosquitoes can go from our, territory to the other one. But then, we do hear this kind of off and on discussions amongst the people who are associated, but not much discussions as far as the general public or the general regulations is concerned, because there's hardly any research or, applications coming for this. But this will definitely come up.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, I don't see any further questions, and I've run out of questions myself. And so I just then like to wrap this up and thank you very much for the time that you've spent with us this morning for us, but this evening for you, and appreciate the time that you've spent in your busy day for giving us the perspective on what the Asian countries are, what their attitudes and their perspective on the negotiations for the CBD and the Cartagena Protocol are. And so, again, I want to thank the audience for being with us these last 6 webinar sessions. And as I said, this is the final one of this webinar session. We will be resuming the webinar series starting in the fall, sometime the fall, US terms, the autumn, 3rd quarter, 4th quarter of 2022. And we look forward to providing you with another set of very interesting talks regarding the genetic biocontrol generally and particularly gene drives. With that, I'm going to close this webinar session. Thank you again, Vibha, and thank the audience for being with us this whole time. And we'll see you again in another month or so. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.